My heart is buried with her, Part 1. Chapter 1, The Last Letter I Wrote. It was never meant to be the last. I wrote it like the others, carefully, deliberately, with trembling fingers and ink that always seemed to blur at the corners of my eyes. The paper was the same soft ivory she used for invitations. The pen was hers, still warm from where I kept it tucked near the hearth. I wrote by candlelight, because that's how she liked it. Said electric bulbs were too harsh, too modern, too unforgiving. My dearest Eleanor. Today the roses bloomed again. You would have liked them this time, no white, just deep crimson, like the color of your lips when you wore that shade I always said was too scandalous for church. The words spilled out of me like breath after drowning. I never sent them, of course. Where would I? I only placed each letter in her old jewelry box, the one I moved to my desk after the funeral. It sits there still, lid closed, gold clasp tarnished. I don't know why I write. Perhaps because forgetting her feels like betrayal. Or perhaps because I've never really believed she was gone. I've done this every week for 3 years. Until this morning. When I opened the desk drawer, the box was gone. Not moved. Not misplaced. Gone. In its place was a single piece of folded paper. Old. Yellowed at the edges. I opened it with shaking hands. It read, "My love. I missed your letter last night. Please don't forget my favorite chair creaks now, grease the left leg like you used to. And don't leave the roses too long in the vase. You always forget. Yours, Eleanor." The handwriting was hers. Exactly hers. Down to the loop in the Y. And at the bottom, a faint smear of lipstick. The color I buried her in. Chapter 2, The Letters Are Gone. I tore the study apart. Not like a madman, though that's what I'm sure I looked like. No, this was methodical. Controlled. My fingers moved through the drawers like they were touching a sleeping child's face, careful, reverent, terrified. I opened the drawer where I'd always kept the box. Gone. I checked the bookshelf where I once tucked the first 2 letters before I found the habit of the jewelry box. Gone. I checked beneath the loose floorboard near the hearth, where I once panicked during a storm and hid 5 of them in a whiskey haze. Gone. 37 letters. All of them. Vanished. In their place? Nothing. Not a trace. Not a corner of paper. Not the faintest scent of that ink I always used. Only dust. As if they had never been there at all. But I remember every one. Eleanor's favorite was the one I wrote on our anniversary, the first after she passed. I had pressed rose petals into the page. I remember how they dried into flakes of crimson over the words, "You should have stayed." I went to the attic next. I hadn't been up there in months. The last time I did, it was to move her wedding dress, still sealed in the dry cleaner's bag, still smelling faintly of cedar and something sweeter. But when I pulled open the attic door, something new had been placed at the top of the stairs. The jewelry box. Just sitting there. No dust on it. Like someone had just carried it there. Delicately. As if it still held jewels and not the weight of a man's grief. I lifted the lid. Empty. I don't know what I expected. The letters? Ashes? A photograph I hadn't seen since the funeral. But the inside was as bare as bone. Except, scratched into the velvet lining, with what looked like the tip of a pin or needle, were 3 words. "Write me again." I ran my thumb over the letters. Fresh. And then the lid slammed shut. Not by my hand. The candle beside me flickered. And in that moment, the attic didn't feel abandoned. It felt like it was watching. Chapter 3, In Her Handwriting. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, though I won't pretend I wasn't unsettled. It was something deeper, older. Like some part of me had been stirred that should have remained still. I sat in the study with the fireplace lit low, the jewelry box resting on the desk like a heart in a glass cage. I didn't open it again. I couldn't. I told myself, tomorrow I'll write another letter. If she's asking me to, then maybe it's what she needs. But by morning, I didn't have to. Because when I opened the door to the study, there was a letter waiting on my desk. Folded neatly. Heavy parchment. Slightly yellowed. Exactly like the one before. I stared at it for a long while, trying to breathe, to reason, to place how it could have gotten there. No one had been in the house. The doors were locked. The windows, shut. No drafts. No tricks. I reached for it slowly, fingertips brushing the edge like it might disappear. It didn't. I unfolded it. And I stopped breathing. My darling. I wish I could tell you where I am. But I don't quite know myself. It feels like a room you once showed me in a dream, where the wallpaper peels but the roses on it still bloom. I heard your voice last night. You whispered something about the wedding dress. I always hated the way they preserved it like a corpse in plastic. Burn it, if you want to. I'd rather be ash than trapped in that silence. And thank you for the rose petals. You always did have a poet's soul, even when your hands shook. I miss the way you read to me. The way you'd stop on my favorite lines just to see if I'd smile. Write again. I can't stay near if you stop. Yours, always. Eleanor. I dropped the letter. The words blurred behind tears, but it wasn't grief this time. It was recognition. She had mentioned the dress. The plastic. The rose petals. Details no one else could have known. I hadn't spoken about them. I hadn't written about them. Except in my thoughts. Except in the last letter I never wrote, only imagined. I looked to the mirror on the far wall, the one that had belonged to her grandmother, with the etched rose vines around the edges. And for the first time since she died, I saw movement in it. Not a shape. Not a shadow. A breath. Like the mirror had sighed. Chapter 4, The Place We Buried Her. I hadn't been back since the funeral. Not because I didn't care. Not because I stopped loving her. But because something in me always feared what I might find there. The last time I stood at her grave, the casket had not yet been lowered. The priest's voice had cracked on her name. The roses I brought had slipped from my fingers and landed on the lid with a sound I can still hear every night when the wind stirs through the trees. But after the second letter, I couldn't stay away. I told myself I only needed to see it. To confirm nothing had changed. To remind myself of what was, so I wouldn't start believing in what couldn't be. The cemetery hadn't changed. Not outwardly. The same iron gates that groaned open as though in mourning. The same rows of aged stones leaning like tired sentinels. The same willow trees with their hair tangled in sorrow. I knew the way by heart. Plot 32. Fifth row from the angel with the broken wing. Eleanor Blythe Winters. 1985 to 2019. In quietness, in beauty, in the final breath of dusk. I whispered her name aloud. And the wind stopped. No breeze. No birds. Even the willow trees stilled. As if the very air had leaned in to listen. Her stone looked unchanged. But the ground before it hadn't. The earth had shifted. Slightly. Barely. But enough that I noticed it. The grass was darker there. Thicker. As though something beneath it had stirred and the soil had fed on the memory. A small depression had formed near the center, like the weight of her name had pressed down too hard from below. I knelt and placed my hand on the soil. It was warm. Not sun-warmed. Breath-warmed. And then I saw it. A piece of paper, half buried at the edge of the grave. I reached for it, heart thundering. It was another letter. Folded. My name on the front, in her handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. You shouldn't have come here, love. It's too soon. I'm not ready yet. But I feel you closer. I can smell the ink on your fingers. Don't cry. You were always so beautiful when you cried. Go home. Write again. I'll be waiting by the fire. P.S. The third drawer creaks again. Grease it, won't you? E. I read it again. And again. And again. And when I finally looked up, the depression in the soil had vanished. The ground had smoothed itself out. Like it had never been disturbed at all. Chapter 5, a scent I shouldn't smell again. I knew the scent the moment it reached me. It wasn't strong. Just a passing note in the air, like someone brushing past you in a hallway you thought was empty. Soft. Sweet. Floral, but not young. The kind of perfume you could only wear after your heart had been broken at least once. Eleanor's perfume. Evening fig and smoke. She used to say it reminded her of the way the earth smells after rain at night. The way a candle smells just after you blow it out. It was subtle. Lingered on scarves. Clung to the inside of books. And after she died, I could never find the bottle. I searched. Desperately. When I packed her things. When I moved them from our bedroom to the guest room. I searched for it in the lining of coats, in drawers, in the corner of her jewelry box. I even called the company once. They told me it had been discontinued 2 years before she passed. And yet, that evening, as I stood in the library, just after sunset, when the last light was bleeding into the wood grain, I smelled it. Not a memory of it. Not the ghost of it. It was there. I stood still. Didn't breathe. Afraid that if I moved too quickly, it would vanish. But instead, it grew stronger. And it was coming from the hall. I followed. The scent led me to the bedroom. Our bedroom. Which I hadn't entered in over a year. The door was ajar. Just barely. The knob cold beneath my palm. Inside, everything was just as I had left it. The dust undisturbed. The curtains drawn. The impression of her body still faintly visible on the mattress, though I knew that had to be my mind playing tricks on me. And on the vanity. A letter. Folded. Her handwriting. Again. I crossed the room slowly. The scent was strongest here, suffocating, even. Not unpleasant, just too much. Like she had sprayed it just before stepping out. I picked up the letter and unfolded it. You still won't touch my side of the bed. Even now. You hover like a ghost and pretend the pillows haven't missed me. I'm not angry, darling. But you don't need to keep punishing the room. It remembers you. It remembers the way you kissed me on mornings we didn't want to leave the sheets. There's something for you in the third drawer. I kept it there because I knew you'd forget. But I never did. Yours? Eleanor. My throat closed. I turned to the dresser. The third drawer, the one I always avoided because it held her scarves, still folded, still holding her warmth even after all this time. I opened it. And there, resting on the edge, her perfume bottle. Nearly full. And still cold. As if it had just been returned. Chapter 6, the third drawer left open. I didn't close the drawer. I couldn't. Not yet. The moment I saw the perfume bottle resting there, cool, heavy, unmistakably hers, I knew this wasn't just a message. It was a memory carefully preserved and returned with purpose. The bottle glinted in the soft amber light spilling through the hallway window, its glass faintly tinted the color of bruised lilac. I lifted it slowly. The cap turned with a delicate crackle, like frost breaking. One whiff of the scent nearly brought me to my knees. It was her. Not a memory. Not a trace. Not a dream clinging to linen. Her. And then I saw it, just beneath the silk scarves, at the back of the drawer. A corner of faded paper, peeking out from under a fold of her favorite indigo wrap. The one she wore the day we met. The one I asked her never to lend out because it made her look like poetry. I moved the scarves aside, hands trembling. The paper was old. Thick. The ink had bled slightly around the edges. It had been folded, then unfolded many times. When I lifted it, a small pressed flower slipped from inside, dried now, brown and brittle, but unmistakable. A violet. Her favorite. The letter was addressed simply. If I forget who I am, remind me. No greeting. No date. No signature. But it was her handwriting. And what was written inside? There may come a day when I no longer speak aloud your name. There may come a morning I cannot lift my head. If that day comes, promise me, bury me where the violets grow. And write until your heart stops answering. Write until your grief remembers that it once was joy. Do not open the third drawer until the perfume returns. And if the perfume returns, then I am not far. I read it again. And again. And again. The silence in the room shifted. Not ominous, not threatening. Aware. And then I noticed something else. The drawer beside me, still open, had moved. Wider now. As if it had exhaled. Or something inside had settled into place. And at the very back, where I had not looked, an envelope. Unsealed. No stamp. No return address. Inside it, a photograph. Not of her. Of me. Taken at my desk. At night. Candles lit. Writing. I don't own a camera. I staggered back. My breath caught. My hands shook. And as I turned toward the vanity mirror, I swore I saw her. Just a glimpse. Just a shadow. Standing behind me. Smiling. Like she'd finally remembered something she'd been trying to tell me all along. Chapter 7, Our Song in the Walls. The house began to hum. Not loudly. Not at first. It started as a whisper in the wood, soft and low, like breath beneath floorboards. I thought it was the wind, maybe a distant train, or some subtle shift in the old bones of the manor. But the rhythm was too careful. Too familiar. It took me a full day to realize what I was hearing wasn't noise. It was music. Or the memory of it. At dusk, as the light slipped from the sky and shadow folded itself into every corner of the house, I heard it more clearly. I was in the sitting room, the one we never used after she passed, the one she insisted we paint blue because it made her feel calm. I was lighting a candle when the sound found me. 3 notes. Slow. Hesitant. A pause. Then 4 more. The melody wasn't perfect. It stuttered, shifted in tempo, like someone playing from memory they didn't fully trust. But I knew the tune. It was ours. A simple song. One I made up for her. Years ago. The first winter we lived here. She had been sick, laid up in bed with a fever and a voice no louder than the snow outside. I sat beside her and hummed a few notes, barely thinking, barely forming a melody. She smiled through the coughs and whispered, again. That song became ours. I only ever played it for her. I never recorded it. Never wrote it down. And yet now. The walls sang it. I followed the sound through the house. It grew louder in the hallway. Stronger near the staircase. And when I reached the music room, the room she played in on Sunday afternoons, the one I locked after she died, the door was open. I hadn't opened it. Not since the funeral. Inside, the piano sat waiting. Its cover was lifted. The keys exposed. One key, middle C, was depressed slightly. Like someone had just played it and forgotten to lift their hand. The melody faded as I stepped inside. The air was colder here, but not unpleasant. The kind of cold that makes you quiet. Reverent. I stood before the piano and slowly sat down. The bench creaked beneath my weight. The sheet music still sat open. The page yellowed and blank. And then, I don't know why, I pressed the keys. Not at random. I played her melody. 3 notes. A pause. For more. But this time, the notes played themselves beneath my fingers. As though my hands remembered what my mind had not. The music moved through the house like breath, filling the space where grief had made silence its throne. And as I played, I saw it. The letter. Resting gently on the piano's music stand. Unfolded. Her handwriting. I missed this. You always rush the 3rd note. But it's okay. You were never good at waiting. Play it again. I'm close. The note trembled in the candlelight. And somewhere behind me, something whispered the final bar of the song. A note I hadn't played yet. But she had. Chapter 8, The Letter She Never Sent. It found me while I was searching for distraction. I had gone to the library not to investigate, but to escape. After the music played itself through my hands, after the letter appeared on the piano stand, after the whisper behind me mimicked the final note, I needed to feel normal again. Or at least pretend. So I did what I used to do on the days she was too tired to leave bed. I picked a book from the shelf at random and tried to disappear inside it. It was Wuthering Heights, her favorite. She always said Catherine wasn't mad, just too full of love for a world that had no place to pour it. I opened the novel to the middle, intending only to lose an hour. Instead, I found a letter. Not folded between the pages. Sealed into them. The edges of the envelope had been pressed into the book's spine, glued there carefully, hidden where no one would think to look, except perhaps someone who remembered that Eleanor had a habit of hiding secrets in stories. It wasn't addressed. There was no name on the front, no date. Just a wax seal. Deep crimson. The same wax we used on our wedding invitations. I broke it slowly, the parchment crackling in protest. Inside, her handwriting. But this time, it wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It bled urgency. Emotion pressed into every loop and curl of the ink. If I don't give this to you, it's because I've decided you don't deserve it yet. Or perhaps I'm the one who's undeserving. I don't know anymore. You see me. You love me. But you don't know me. Not really. You think you do, but what you love is the part one let you see. The rest, the shadows, the silence, the nights I lie awake and ask the house to forget me, you turn away from that. You pretend it doesn't live with us. But it does. And soon, you'll feel it too. I left something in the floorboards beneath the piano. I don't know if you'll find it. I hope you do. Because by the time you read this, I think I'll be gone. I love you. That was always real. But I also loved the quiet. The stillness. The way death waits in the corners. Promise me, if I start writing back, you'll read every word. My hand trembled. Beneath the piano. I returned to the music room without hesitation. The room felt different now. Dimmer. Not darker, deeper. Like a well you didn't know you were falling into until you hit water. I knelt beside the piano and pressed my hand to the floor. The wood was warped in one spot. Slightly raised. I pried it up with the fire poker I'd brought from the study. Underneath. A box. Small. Black. And bound with a ribbon. I lifted it, breath caught in my throat. Inside. A stack of letters. Addressed to me. All in her handwriting. all unopened. Every single one sealed. And at the very top, a note. Don't open them yet. Not until the veil lifts. You'll know when. I always hated endings, remember? So let's start again. Chapter 9, The Wedding Ring Returns. I hadn't worn my wedding ring in over a year. At first, I kept it on out of habit. I'd twist it while I wrote to her, sometimes forgetting it was there until I caught the glint in candlelight. But as the grief settled into silence, into routine, I slid it off one night and never put it back on. Hers, though, hers I buried with her. I remember it clearly. The weight of it on my palm before I placed it in her casket. A gesture that made the priest raise his eyebrows and made her mother quietly weep into gloved hands. It was gold. Simple. Engraved inside with the words, "My heart is yours." It was never meant to be found again. So when I lifted my teacup that morning and heard the soft metallic clink against porcelain, I nearly dropped it. At first, I thought it was the spoon. But I hadn't used one. I looked inside. And there, nestled in the bottom of the cup like it had always belonged there, was her ring. Cold. Gleaming. Faintly wet with tea. I couldn't breathe. I reached in and lifted it between my fingers, staring, frozen. The engraving on the inside, still clear. My heart is yours. The same scratches. The same weight. But it had been buried with her. I had kissed her hand one last time before slipping the ring on. I had watched it fall against the white silk of her burial shroud. And now, it was in my cup. No note. No explanation. Only this impossible truth. I held it for a long time. And then I slipped it on my finger. It still fit. And the moment I did, I felt it. A presence. Not physical. Not seen. But felt, like warmth in the room just after someone enters. I turned toward the hallway. The door to the guest room was open. The guest room, where I had placed her things. Her dresses. Her books. Her photographs. The room I hadn't touched in over a year. I hadn't opened that door. But now it stood open. Inside, the bed had been made. Fresh sheets. A pillow fluffed. And on the center of the bed, a folded dress. The one she wore the night I proposed. Midnight blue. Lace at the collar. And pinned to the dress. Another letter. You found it. Good. I was afraid you'd stop looking. I left the ring with you because I couldn't wear it anymore. Not where I went. But now I think I'm closer than I thought. Try not to be frightened. I'm just remembering you again. Wear it until I return. Yours, Eleanor. I sat down on the edge of the bed, her ring warming my skin, her dress whispering against the linens beside me. And in the mirror across the room, there were 2 teacups on the nightstand. Only one of them mine. Chapter 10, I hear her say my name. There are some sounds the heart never forgets. The creak of a floorboard beneath a familiar footfall. The click of a teacup returning to its saucer in the stillness of morning. The soft intake of breath before someone you love says your name. It was that last one I heard tonight. I hadn't planned on writing her again, not that night. I had already written so much, and she had begun replying in ways that made me question whether this was love or madness, grief or haunting. I needed time. Space. But grief has never respected such things. It curls through cracks, it leans against you in doorways, it waits behind mirrors and under the skin of your thoughts. I was in the study. The fire had burned down to embers. The ring, her ring, still rested on my finger, warmer now than before. I had begun reading one of her old books, the ones she marked with careful pencil strokes. She always underlined the smallest lines, the ones no one else noticed. The ones that felt like sighs. I heard the floorboard creak behind me. I didn't turn. I couldn't. Because deep inside me, something had already turned to meet it. I waited. Stillness. Then. Matthew. Soft. Precise. Her voice. Not a whisper in my mind. Not a memory unspooling. Her. It came from behind me. Just over my left shoulder. The exact place she used to stand when reading over my work, resting a hand on my shoulder with that quiet half-smile. I turned slowly. No one. The chair beside mine was empty. The candle on the desk flickered, but the flame didn't dance. It bowed. As if something had moved past it. The silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was full. Like breath held by a room that was waiting to speak again. I stood, unsure whether to follow the sound or flee from it. Then I saw it. A shadow in the hallway. Tall. Feminine. Still. Facing the stairs. I stepped out of the study and into the hall, and the air changed around me. The scent of her perfume returned, so faint it might have been imagined, if not for the ache in my chest it always brought with it. The shadow turned the corner. I followed. Past the piano room. Toward the front hall. And there, resting on the floor near the door. A sheet of paper. Torn. Uneven edges. As though ripped from a journal. Her handwriting. I'm sorry I didn't say goodbye. I was afraid it would feel too much like an ending. But I never stopped loving the way you said my name. Say it again. Say it like you used to, when I was falling asleep beside you. Say it, and I'll come back. I looked up from the note. And for the first time in years, I said her name aloud. Eleanor. And somewhere deep within the house, like a breath finally exhaled, something moved. Chapter 11, A Visit at 2:13 a.m. The clock woke me. Not the chime, Eleanor had always hated those. The grandfather clock in the hallway had been silenced years ago, at her request. It still kept perfect time, but it no longer sang the hours. No, what woke me was the sound I hadn't heard in years. A soft, precise tick. Once. Twice. Then silence. Then again. As if the clock had momentarily remembered what it was for. I sat up in bed, disoriented. The guest room was dark, but not silent. The kind of hush that feels expectant, like the walls are holding their breath with you. I turned to the clock face across the hall, visible from where I lay. Its hands pointed with certainty. 2:13 a.m. The exact time Eleanor died. I hadn't needed the death certificate to remember it. The moment etched itself into me like frost under skin. The minute her breath stopped, everything in the room had gone still. The candle beside her guttered without wind. The mirror cracked without touch. The air grew so heavy I could hardly cry. And now, years later, the clock ticked again, for the first time since that night. I rose. The hallway was lit only by the moon, pouring pale light through the tall front window. I walked barefoot across the floorboards, each step quieter than I expected. The air felt charged. Like just before a storm, when the hairs on your arms stand without wind. I reached the foot of the stairs. And saw it. A single fingerprint. On the glass of the front door. Just above the handle. Not smudged. Not faint. Pressed. Deliberate. Small. Too small to be mine. I reached for the handle, but stopped. Because the door was ajar. I hadn't unlocked it. I always bolted it before bed. I stepped out onto the porch, moonlight bathing the wood in pale silver. No wind. No birds. No sound. Except a footstep on the gravel path. I turned my head sharply. A shadow at the edge of the garden. slim, barefoot, still, wearing a long dress that shimmered faintly in the light. She didn't move. Nor did I. And then, with a slowness that broke my heart open, she raised her hand. Not to wave, but to place it gently over her chest. As if to say, "Here." I kept it. I always did. I whispered her name again. Eleanor. She didn't vanish. She only turned and walked back into the garden. Her favorite path. The one that led nowhere now, but had once led to the place she called her own. The rose arbor. Where I'd proposed. Where I first told her I loved her. Where I scattered violets after the funeral, because the roses hadn't yet bloomed. I stepped inside again, hard hammering. And there, on the hall table, a note. Folded. Waiting. You still say my name like it belongs to you. That's how I found my way back. Tomorrow, come to the garden. I left something there. Something for both of us. I'll wait until the clock strikes twice. Don't be afraid of what blooms. The clock behind me ticked again. Just once. But it was enough to remind me. Time had started again. Chapter 12. She remembers what I forgot. The garden was never meant to be beautiful after death. Eleanor used to say it was a place for beginnings. She planted things in strange patterns, never rows, never symmetry. She believed the earth liked to be surprised. That too much order made the roots restless. Every spring, it erupted in chaotic glory, creeping jasmine tangling with blood-red roses, night-blooming lilies alongside wild violets. But after she died, the garden had grown quiet. Until now. That morning, just before dawn, I stood on the back porch staring at the overgrown arbor. The vines had twisted high above the arch, curling like fingers around the ironwork. In the center of the path, where the flagstones had long disappeared beneath moss and fallen petals, something glimmered. Not light. Paper. I crossed the lawn slowly, dew dampening my slippers. The scent of roses, ripe, heady, unnaturally strong, rose like fog around me. The garden was in full bloom. Impossible. It had been bare only days before. And then I saw it. A letter. Pinned to the arbor's center with a silver hairpin I hadn't seen since the day I proposed. I removed the pin with shaking fingers and opened the page. Her handwriting, again. But this time, angry. You forgot. I thought you never would. You told me love was memory, and that to forget was to lose it. And still, you forgot the garden. You forgot what we buried here. You said it would be a secret, something no one else could touch. But when I died, you sealed it up like shame. You locked it behind overgrowth and grief. I remember it all now. I remember the letter I wrote you here. The first one. Dig beneath the arbor. Where the violets first took root. You'll find what I left. You'll find what I was never brave enough to say aloud. My knees gave way before I realized I was kneeling. I scraped back soil with my bare hands, tearing through roots and soft earth. The scent of earth and memory overwhelmed me, loam and lavender, rust and rosewater. And then my fingers struck wood. A small box. Old. Water-stained. The kind we used for keepsakes in our early years, when love was new and time felt infinite. I pulled it free and lifted the lid. Inside. A letter. Dated 3 years before she died. Months before the illness. Folded carefully, its edges worn with time and trembling intent. My dearest Matthew. If you find this, then either I am braver than I thought, or you are kinder than I deserved. I never told you everything. I wanted to. I tried. But sometimes love hides in silence because it fears what truth will unmake. There is something inside me that has always belonged to the dark. a shadow I cannot name. A part of me that heard whispers where there were none, and wrote replies before I even knew who they were from. You loved me in spite of it. But you never asked. And I never spoke. And so it grew. If you ever feel me near after I'm gone, it's because I never truly left. I've always belonged to the in-between. And now, I think I'm beginning to remember how to live there. I will keep writing. Will you? There were tears on my hands, but I didn't know whose they were. Behind me, the roses moved, not in wind, but in rhythm. As though they had heard the letter read aloud. And approved. Chapter 13, The Mirror in the Attic. The attic had always felt like a place set aside for endings. We stored the things we couldn't part with there, the remnants of other lives, books too worn to donate, paintings we never hung, boxes filled with objects we once thought essential but now could no longer name. Eleanor used to say that memories gather dust just like anything else. That if you leave them alone long enough, they begin to lose their edges, until they soften into sorrow or vanish entirely. But there was one thing she never allowed to gather dust. The mirror. Tall. Oval. Framed in tarnished silver with carvings that curled like vines. We inherited it from her aunt, along with a vague warning never to stare too long. Superstition, I had assumed. Eleanor never placed it in our bedroom, never left it uncovered. It had always been wrapped in linen, stored in the attic corner, turned toward the wall like something shamed. After the garden. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The box, the letter, the truth she buried, I felt them all pointing upward. And so, just after sunset, I lit a lantern and climbed the narrow stairs, each creak beneath my feet sounding less like protest and more like hesitation. The attic air was cool and dry, dense with forgotten breath. I found the mirror in the far corner. Still covered. Still waiting. I stood before it, unsure whether I wanted to remember what she was guiding me toward, or what she had once tried so hard to forget. And then I pulled the cloth away. The glass did not reflect me. Not immediately. Instead, it showed the room as it was, not as it had become. The clutter was gone. The boxes vanished. The light flickered differently. The wallpaper, faded in real life, was intact here, deep blue with silver filigree. I saw myself, years younger, standing at the center of the room, Eleanor beside me. She was laughing. We were dancing. It was a night I had forgotten. The night the power went out during a storm. We lit candles, opened wine, and climbed to the attic with an old record player. We danced to static and silence, our steps uncoordinated and clumsy, and yet somehow perfect. She whispered something to me that night. I remember her leaning in close, her lips near my ear, her breath warmer than the wine. In the mirror, I saw it again. She whispered. And I, older, now, leaned closer to the glass. And for the first time, the memory turned to me. Eleanor looked past her younger self, looked at me, through the mirror. Her smile faded. She stepped forward, her hand reaching toward the surface. And in the reflection, I saw her lips form the words. You forgot what I said. And then, her hand touched mine. The glass was cold as snow. I gasped, staggered back. The mirror shimmered. Returned to its true reflection. Just me. Just the attic. Just dust. But in my palm, the faintest trace of warmth. And tucked in the corner of the frame, like it had always been there. A folded piece of paper. Her handwriting. We danced because we were afraid the storm would remember us. You said you'd never let go, even if the candles burned out. I didn't believe you then. But maybe now I do. Do you remember the song? Play it. And below, in letters barely visible. The piano knows.
Every story has an ending, but some mysteries live on. If you enjoyed this tale, don't let it fade into the shadows. Smash that like button and subscribe for more thrilling stories that will transport you beyond the veil of the ordinary. Subscribe to our channel and your name will appear at the beginning of our next video, where we will pleasantly thank you for your subscribing. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a journey into the unknown. Share your thoughts in the comments. What twists did you see coming? And what secrets do you think still remain? Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and let the next story begin.